Welcome to part 2 of the Module 10 Skills video. In this video, we're going to incorporate SQL into our database automation using macros, of course. We'll also use a new form control and a new form type within our database, a navigation form. First, let's talk about structured query language, SQL for short. SQL is a way to query data using SQL statements. Queries come in 3 views: datasheet, design, and SQL. We can create a query using SQL by itself. For example, if I want to select all the records from table visit, I can write an SQL statement to do so. To create a query in SQL view, click the Create tab, Query Design, and here's the important part, close Show Table window. And now select SQL View. From here we can type in our SQL statement. To select all the records and all the columns from table visit, simply type in select asterisks, making sure that you are typing within the semicolons from table visit. The asterisk tells Access, or for that matter any database system, to select all columns and all records from a particular table. Clicking Run, our SQL statement has returned all the records from table visit. Now this is a very simple select statement. It only includes the 2 mandatory parts required for an SQL statement to execute. Those 2 mandatory parts are the select clause and the from clause. In an SQL statement, the select is used to name the columns that will appear in the result, and the from is used to list the table or tables those fields come from. Selectatory. Makes sense, right? You need fields to appear in the results and you need to specify where they come from. We can incorporate 2 additional clauses in our SQL statement. The where clause, which is used to specify criteria, and the order by clause, which is used to sort the results. Order by, if used, will sort ascending by default. If you need to sort descending, you have to specify that in the SQL as DESC. Let's save this query. I'll call this one query SQL1 and click OK. Closing it. If a query is created in SQL view, it's very easy to tell. By opening the query in design view, it will default to SQL view and not design view. So if you think, I'll just create it in design view, it won't show up like this. It will go right to design view. If it's created using SQL statements, when clicking design view, it opens up like this. Let's incorporate all 4 clauses into an SQL statement. We're going to create a new query based on table owner that selects records for owners who live in the city of Cody and sorts by their last name from Z to A. Sorting from Z to A is a descending sort, so we'll need to specify that. Once again, we'll create a new query, going to design view, closing the table, and changing to SQL. And for this one, I will select specific columns. With our SQL typed out, a couple things to point out. First off, when using criteria that involves string or text, we need to place double quotations around it. Access in SQL view will not automatically take care of this. If you're using date as criteria, you have to place the pound signs around the date itself. Lastly, the end of the SQL statement, there should be a semicolon. When I created the SQL, I typed within the semicolon, so it ended up being at the end when I finished. Now let's test the query. We'll run it, and here we return 10 records using the 4 columns we specified, all coming from the city of Cody. In an SQL statement, you don't need to include the field used in a where clause in the select. It's a good idea initially just to test the result. We see that our SQL produced the correct results. Let's remove city and see if we get the same results. In my select, I will delete city, rerun the query, and once again, we get the same 10 results mapped. Using SQL is another method we can use to query data from tables. This is the method used when working with backend server-based databases. Now we'll save our query, and I will name this query SQL2. And close it. And once again, if I open this in design view, it opens in SQL view. That's because I created it in SQL view. Next, we're going to create a form that uses a new type of control, a list box. And that list box will display all of the queries within the database. On the form itself, we're going to add buttons with macro actions to run a selected query and include some additional macro actions for the list box and the form itself. First, we're going to create a new form and name it Form Queries. In Design View, I'll save it and name it, and now we can get to work. Recall from the concepts video, there are two types of forms. There are bound forms, which have a record source attached to them, and unbound forms, forms that don't have a record source attached to them. The form we're creating here is an unbound form. It won't be attached to a record source. As such, there are some properties we can adjust on the form to better fit it as an unbound form, such as removing the navigation buttons and record select. How does that look when a form is unbound? If I change to Form View on this form, you'll notice down at the bottom, here are our record selectors and navigation buttons. However, since there is no record source attached to this form, it will always show one of one, and really moving or using the buttons has no effect. So to create a more professional looking form, we should remove these. Back in Design View, on the form's property sheet, if we move down, we can see our record selectors property. We can double click that to no, as well as navigation buttons, no. Now moving back to Form View, we see that they're no longer there. Again, makes the form look better. Two other properties we can modify are the form's caption and disabling the form's shortcut menu. The caption property will replace what currently shows up at the top. In this case, it shows Form Queries. We can change our caption to just say Queries, and then if we go back to our Form View, again, it just shows Queries. So it makes it a little more user-friendly rather than showing access naming conventions and the object name of whatever object we're showing, in this case, a form. The other thing we can set is our shortcut menu. Back here on Form Queries, if I right-click, you'll see the shortcut menu gives us some options, including being able to access the form in Design View. Having that ability is not a good idea when you have a secure database. You don't want a user to be able to access Design View and make inadvertent changes. So disabling this menu is something that is a very good idea if you want a secure database. To disable the shortcut menu, the quickest way is to go to the other tab, and we have a shortcut menu property. If we set this to no, now go back to our Form View, and when you attempt to right click, the shortcut menu does not come up. Again, shortcut menus, disabling them is another way of securing a database. We're going to be looking at other ways to secure a database in Module 12. Going back to Design View, we're ready to start actually designing our form. And we're going to do this by creating a list box on the form that displays queries in the database. List boxes are similar to combo boxes. They can contain multiple values, but instead of displaying a single value in a drop-down menu, a list box will display all values, if all the values can be displayed, that is. If they can't, a list box will include a scroll bar so a user can scroll up and down through the box to see all the values that are there. Let's add the list box. First off, I'm going to disable my control wizard. I want this to be manually done. And then opening up my controls, a list box looks similar to a combo box, except it does not have that up or drop down. So I'll select my list box. I'm going to place it right about at the 1 and 1 inch mark and drop it in. The next thing I'm going to do is it has a label, and I'm going to move the label itself so that it appears just above the list box. And because this list box will display queries, I will change the caption of it directly in the label to say available queries. The next thing I'm going to do is provide the list box itself a meaningful name. Selecting the entire list box and going to its property sheet, under the name control, I'm going to use proper access naming conventions and give it the proper prefix. For a list box, that is LST, and I'm going to call this query list. I have changed the caption of the label for it, and I've given the list box a meaningful name. Next, we're going to fill the list box with all the available queries in the database. To do this, we're going to create an SQL statement and set it to the list box row source property. Moving to the Data tab, here's the row source property, and this is what we will use to create an SQL statement that fills the list box. Zooming it, in an Access database, there are system tables in the background that keep track of the various objects within the database itself. This table is called MSysObjects. It contains a listing of all the tables, forms, reports, and queries in the database. The query names are stored in the name field of that table. We're going to create a select statement that selects the name field from MSysObjects table. We're going to need to include criteria though, as we only want the queries that we've created. In every Access database, there are system queries that database uses in the background, and we don't want those queries to show up in this list box. System queries contain a tilde in the front of their name. We're also going to use an order by so the queries are sorted in alphabetical order. We're going to create a select then that will select the name field from MSysObjects table where the object type is a query. We're going to use the type field as criteria, and a query's type is type 5, and then we're going to include where criteria that does not include the system queries. So we're going to use a left function that extracts the tilde. So if it equals a tilde, we don't want that. And then finally, we're going to sort the results alphabetically. This is how the select will look. So typing into the row source box, and this is how it will have to be formatted. Clicking OK, we can now test our list box. And we're going to do this in layout view so we can adjust the size of the list box. So in layout views, we can see that our select statement has indeed returned our queries. From here, we simply adjust so that we can see all of the queries listed as well as their entire name. Next, we're going to create two buttons that will display a selected query, one in Datasheet view and the other in Print Preview. Once again, going back to Design View, once we've resized a Control and Layout view in Design View, our form will shorten, so we'll need to expand this out, and we'll add our buttons. First, make sure that your control wizard is off. Next, we will select a button, and I'm going to position this one right below the list box to the left-hand side, and I will drop the button into place. Next thing, I'm going to set some properties for the button. Under the All tab, I will add the caption preview, and I'm going to add a picture to this button as well. To do this, go to your picture property and click the build button, and this will open up the picture builder. And this displays all the icons that are available in an Access database. For this one, like the caption, I want to find the preview option, and the preview picture is a magnifying glass. I'll click OK, and I'm going to also set the picture caption arrangement to bottom, and finally I want to set the back color for this. So under Format, I will go to my back color, and I'm going to set this one to a green, and then finally resize the button so that it will show my caption as well as the picture. Next, I want to add one more button, but rather than stepping through the entire process, I'm simply going to copy and paste a new button into the form. Reselecting the button, if you go Control-C, Control-V, it'll place the button right below it. And with this one, I'll move this over, place it to the right of the list box, and make the necessary alignments, aligning it to the top, and just to double check that it's aligned properly with the list box. And from here, I'll make just a couple changes. Caption, I'll change to display, and the picture, I will change to MS Access Query. Moving down my available pictures, I will find MS Access Query, select that instead, and that will change the icon on the button. Now, we'll create embedded macros for these buttons using their on-click event. Starting with Preview, under the Event tab, I will select the macro builder. Clicking OK, the action will be Open Query, and the query name will be the query that's selected in the list box. To do this, I'm going to start by typing equals, and over on the far right, you'll notice a builder Click on the builder and this will bring up your available expression categories that are available in the form. And I want list query list. This is the reason that we created a meaningful name for the list box, so we could easily find it and then simply double click it. Once we click OK, now what this is telling the macro is to open the query that we've selected in the list box. The view for this one we're going to select will be print preview. When we select print preview, this will actually open up two versions of the query. The initial version that you'll first see will be the print preview version. Once you close the print preview, the query will also be open in datasheet view. We'll save this and close it, and next we will create the embedded macro for the display button. Once again, for the click, we'll select the macro builder. The query name, again, will be what's selected in the list box, so first typing equals and then selecting the builder. Double click list query list and select OK. And the view will be datasheet, so everything else is correct. So we'll save and close this. And now we have our macros set up for our buttons. We're going to add two more macro actions to our form. First, we're going to create a macro for the form's onload event that will automatically have the first query in the list box selected. And the second action will be to set the list box's double click event. When a query is double clicked, it will open in datasheet view. Starting with the form onload, we'll select our form, and under our onload event, we're going to open the macro builder. We're going to use two actions for this particular event. The first thing we need to do is to go to control when the form loads. So under the action, we're going to go to control, and we need to list the control name. Just like under control name, we begin by typing in the name of the control, and it will find that control for us, which is list query list, and tab to auto select it. So when the form loads, the first thing that happens is focus will go to the list box. The next thing we need to do is make sure that the first query in the list box is selected. To do this, we're going to use what's called a send keys action. Send keys action is a way to programmatically press keys on the keyboard. And we're going to use send keys with the down arrow. And this will select that first query. Send keys is what's considered an unsafe action. And unsafe actions don't appear in our add new action list. Why is send keys an unsafe action? Well, again, send keys is a way to manipulate the keyboard. And whenever you manipulate a keyboard, that is not a safe action. If we look in our drop down, going into S, you'll see send keys isn't there. To bring send keys into this list, up on the ribbon under the show hide, we need to select show all actions. And by clicking show all actions, it'll include any actions that are considered unsafe in a macro. Now, if we arrow down to the S's, we will see that send keys is there. So we're going to select send keys, and whenever you select an unsafe action, you will see this icon, this cautionary icon, and arrowing over it, you'll see that it is indicated of an unsafe action. To set the keystrokes, we will type in the word down surrounded in braces. And again, the braces are on the key with the square brackets, except we need to hit the shift key to bring it up. And then we're going to type in the word down and then close it within the bracket. Next, we will save and close this and our form onload event. Finally, we're going to set an embedded macro for the list box's double click event. And this one, when double clicked and a query is selected, will open the query in datasheet view. So much the same way as this button, we will select the list box, and on the double click event, bring up the builder, and again the query name will be what's selected in the list box. So we'll type equals, bring up the builder, double click list query list, and select OK, and then everything else is perfect the way it's set. We want it in datasheet view, so we'll save and close the macro builder. Now it's time to test the form. Save the form. Let's change it into form view. And here we see with the onload event, it has selected the first query in the list box. Let's check the preview button. So query all animals and visits is selected. Click preview and it opens it in print preview. We close print preview, and As I'd mentioned, you actually have two views. It opens initially in Print Preview, and once you close Print Preview, it will show it in Datasheet view. Next, let's check the Display button. Clicking it, it opens it in Datasheet view. After this, let's double-click in the list box, and here Query All Animals and Visits opens up. Just to make sure it's not a fluke, let's open Owners and Invoices. It opens it up. So here we have created a list box that displays every query in the database except for system queries. We've added two buttons to our form, have embedded macros set to those, which opens the query in Print Preview and Datasheet view. We've set the forms on load event so that it will arrow to the first query in the list, and we've created an embedded macro in the list box's double-click event. We've also set the unbound form properties for form queries so that it doesn't display record selectors or navigation buttons. We've also disabled the shortcut menu for the form and created a custom caption for it. The last thing we're going to cover in this video are navigation forms. As the name implies, they help a user to navigate the various objects within a database, and they're super easy to create. On the Create tab in the Forms group, there is a navigation form option here. When you click the down arrow, there are several types of navigation forms that are available to you. We're going to create a horizontal tabs 2-level navigation form. Click it, it actually opens the form in Layout view. And the nice thing about this form is, again, it's really easy to use and create. This one has upper level tabs, and each tab down below you can place and group the related objects. So for this first tab, I will name it Forms, and once I click the tab button, it'll create a new tab for me, and this one I'll refer to as Reports, and then finally I will add one that says Queries. Now, to add forms to my Form tab, this is how easy it is. And you're going to see an error message come up, and this is due to the macros that I've set up on these forms. But with the navigation form you'll create, you won't have this issue. So I'll just drop this first form in, and my Form Visits and Invoices now shows under this Forms tab. I will add Form Visits, put that in, and I will go ahead and drop in Form Owner. And now I've got 3 forms showing on my Forms tab. Under Reports, I'll do the same thing. I'll click my Reports tab and drag a couple reports here. So I'll add my Report Billing and Invoices, and then Report Invoices by Item. And then finally on my Queries tab, I'll move over Form Queries. Another thing that you can do, and it's very easy to do here, is to remove the title for the form or the icon that's showing here. It's simply a matter of selecting it and pressing your Delete key. And now you've removed the title. And then finally, setting a caption value for the navigation form. You can do it right here directly in the property sheet under All up at the top. And for the caption, I'll name this my veterinary database. And once I do that, I now have my database name right under the tab. And with that, our navigation form is complete. That'll wrap up part 2 of the Module 10 Skills video. As a reminder, after viewing the Concepts and Skills video, it's a great time to take the module quiz while the material is still fresh. And of course, use the rewind button if you need to review any of the materials further.